everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Nature News. My name is Renee.
Hi guys, my name is Cara.
So we're going to talk to you a little bit about ice harvesting.
Alright, so I don't know if anyone knows, but the Refuge back in the early 1900s was actually the Quag Ice Company. So our big freshwater pond that's actually behind us that many of you might have seen was an ice harvesting pond. So today we're going to talk to you all about the ice harvesting history that happened here in the early 1900s. So we're excited that you guys are here, and we'll get started. And as always, feel free to ask questions in the comments, and we can get to those too.
All right, so I'm just going to take the camera down and swap our lens. Sorry. All right, so first we want to start off talking about the history of ice harvesting. How did it get its start? So this man right here in this picture is Frederick Tudor, and Frederick Tudor was referred to as the Ice King. So the ice industry began in Boston in 1805, and it was mainly due to the ambition of Frederick Tudor. He wanted to actually market ice to the well-to-do population. And he was imagining it as something to cool drinks during the summer months. So a lot of people actually thought that his idea was kind of a joke. They didn't take him very seriously. So what he had to do is that he actually tried to do it all independently. So he purchased a shipping vessel, and his first 2 shipments of ice were actually unsuccessful. So while he was kind of working on creating a better method for shipment, another man named Nathaniel Wyeth actually started to kind of work on the process of ice harvesting itself and devised a method that actually transformed the industry. It cut down a lot of time on the way that they harvested the ice. So Tudor improved the storage, improved the transportation process, and so much that actually by 1909, so he was no longer alive at this time, but by that time, 1909, there were actually 2,000 commercial ice plants. So it became very successful and it became very popular. So the ice industry actually revolutionized many businesses because the cities began to grow and people became farther from their food source. So the ice industry then allowed them to transport perishable items and ship them with minimal spoilage. So that was really, really important. And that really changed the world. So you can see some images of kind of marketing strategies to get people to help harvest ice, marketing strategies with old refrigerators and storage. So the Quag Ice Company is what took place here at the Refuge. So what kind of made the Quag Ice Company have to come or become established here was that there was a large expanding population of summer boarders. So people coming to visit and live in the summer in Quag, and it created a greater demand for ice. So they formed the Quag Ice Company. So we kind of talked a little bit about where the original damming was when we were over in our Fairy Dale walk. So some of you might remember some of this talk a little bit, but originally a causeway was built, which is where Montauk Highway was. It was built across Quantuck Bay to Queog Neck. And that was a major engineering feat of its time to build this causeway. And the original dam was located at that causeway. So it was where they harvested ice down the creek, down the Quantuck Creek. But what happened was they changed a lot of navigation regulations and other regulations and actually prohibited the damming of that waterway. So the creek became very shallow once they removed the dam, and there was an emergence of vegetation, and it made the site unsuitable for ice harvesting. So they had to move the facility to a new location. So in 1913, the Quag Ice Company erected an earthen dam, which is north of the railroad tracks. It's right by where the area we call Ferrydale. And the pond, the old ice pond that you see at the Refuge today, was dredged to about 5 to 7 feet. So a great depth for ice harvesting, more suitable for ice harvesting. And then the Refuge Distressed Wildlife Complex, the complex that you see that houses our outdoor animals, was actually the foundation of the outdoor wildlife complex. So it could hold up to 3,000 tons of ice. So you'll see around our outdoor animal cages, kind of a concrete foundation. That was the foundation for the old ice building. So there's also some really amazing images that we have, some older photos. These are girls delivering ice from 1918. This picture we actually will show you in a moment. We have a bigger one blown up. But this was the original location. They were harvesting ice at the original location on Quantuck Creek. That's from 1909. Here's the location when they swapped it over to Old Ice Pond. So I want to hold you guys steady. Give me one moment. But this is the dam that was created right here. And then this is where the animal cages are. Here's a method of delivering the ice locally. And there's a cool old map of some of the ice harvesting sites. So, nearing the end of the 19th century, natural ice or ice harvesting faced a lot of problems because of contamination, because of industrialization. So a lot of lakes and rivers became polluted. So it wasn't suitable, the water wasn't suitable for harvesting and using as ice. So there was refrigeration technology coming out at this time, and it gave rise to mechanical refrigeration. So by the 1920s, the refrigerator was an essential piece of furniture in every household. You can see there's so many different ads that they would put out trying to convince everyone of why they need a refrigerator. This ad says, "It's a gift for the whole family." So here's an image of an older refrigerator. And they were using originally lots of different more natural refrigerants, so like methyl chloride, sulfur dioxide, and ammonia. But what happened was that these could leak into the refrigerators and cause sickness and even death. So they had to create a better way. So refrigerators weren't very popular at that time because of those risks. So there was a man that actually discovered Frigidaire, someone from Frigidaire discovered a new class of synthetic refrigerants called halocarbons or chlorofluorocarbons. You might have heard of chlorofluorocarbons, CFCs, or hydrochlorofluorocarbons is another way that they refer to them. And because of that advancement, they were able to then market a lot of refrigerants. And we're going to talk a little bit more about chlorofluorocarbons in just a moment. But because of that advancement, then ice companies actually ceased production. And the Quag Ice Company ceased production in 1925 because of the advancement of mechanical refrigeration. So Cara's going to talk to you a little bit more about the process of ice harvesting.
Great. So ice harvesting was a really hard process that took a lot of people, a lot of manpower, but also a lot of horsepower too. So in the mural that you can see in our exhibit here, this mural was actually painted in 1988. And it depicts the Quag Wildlife Refuge when it was the Quag Ice Company and when there was ice harvesting. So it took a lot of work, as we said, but first the ice harvesting would actually happen in the months of January, February, and March when the pond would freeze. And of course it's fresh water. But first the ice had to be at least 5 inches thick for the workers and for the horses to be out on the ice. But it was usually better if the ice was 10 inches thick. And to prepare the ice, they had to actually clear away all of the snow from the ice. And they would use horse-drawn, basically like big shovels or a scraper for removing the snow from the ice field. And by doing that, that snow is such a good insulator that when they removed the snow, the ice would freeze more. So that was an important step. And of course, clearing the snow helped them when they were going to mark and cut the ice field. So in the mural, you might be able to see the checkerboard pattern of all of those ice blocks. And by taking horses out on the field and bringing that ice plow that would go behind the horse team, they would be able to mark out a grid pattern, and then they'd have to score it, cut the ice, and that was a really big step too. Sometimes they would use large hand saws to do this part, but either way, the next part, and you can see it kind of in the middle of the mural, they would have to open up a channel of water that would lead to the conveyor belt. So when they opened up the channel of water, this was really hard to actually keep open because of course it was freezing cold outside. So it took a lot of work just to keep open the ice channel. But when they were harvesting the ice, they would have to then break off with hand chisels the ice flows that they would push into the channel of water, and then of course up to the conveyor belt. And the ice was really heavy. One ice block can weigh over 100 pounds. So that it kind of shows you how much work it took to cut the ice to then push it into the conveyor belt. And of course, that's the next step. They were moving the ice through the water channel into the elevator chain, and there's a steam-powered engine that ran the conveyor belt. And when they did this, they pushed the ice blocks onto the conveyor belt, and there were people inside the ice house waiting to unload all of the blocks. So it could maybe take one person to feed ice into the chamber, but then 15 to 20 men inside of the building stowing the ice away. And the ice houses were really specifically designed. As you can see in that big white building on the left-hand side, there are no windows. It's painted white to deflect any heat, and that was to keep it nice and cool. And it was actually better for the ice to be stored above ground than below ground, because as the ice slowly melted, and it was stored with sawdust to keep it from melting, but when ice sits in the meltwater, it would melt quicker. But in an ice house like the one that was here at the Refuge, it could store tons of ice, and the meltwater would just leak slowly down. That way the ice blocks weren't sitting in the meltwater. So the next step, of course, was storage, and we talked a lot about our ice house. But the Quag Ice Company storage house measured 64 by 78 feet. It could have had 4 to 6 rooms and was 30 feet high. And like Renee said earlier, the foundation of the ice house is where our animal cages are today. So they would actually store a third more than anticipated needs or what they would sell, because some of it, of course, would melt. And then since it was being stored in that really big ice house, they had to sell it. So delivering the ice was another big step. And the Quag Ice Company, of course, ice is in demand when it's nice and hot in spring and summer. And the Iceman would bring the harvested ice to the local towns. But for people to order it, what they would do is put signs in their window. And certain ice companies were different than others. Usually they were bright colors, just like the ones that you can kind of see. And it depends on the ice company, but whichever number you put on top or on the bottom would be how many pounds of ice you wanted to order. And as we were saying before, one ice block could be up to 100 pounds. So if you want to order more than that, that would be a kind of a lot of ice. And I wanted to show you guys really quick this foundation block that you can see there's an ice sled on top of. That was actually the foundation for the steam engine. So this building that we're in right now housed the steam engine that ran the conveyor belt. And that's where we have all of our signage in our exhibit. And this was redone in 2018, all of these new signs. And of course the tools are old. Some of them are original to the Quag Ice Company. We've got the chisels, the horse-drawn ice plows and cutters, some nice horseshoes, and some more tools, some ice tongs and a block that would be the size of an ice block, but that one is made out of styrofoam. And then I did want to show you guys, we have this great book on ice harvesting, but all of these signs are just examples of the different ice companies that operated in the early 1900s all across the U.S. to sell ice.
All right, so I do want to show you some of the older refrigerators that we have here, or ice boxes actually. So these were like well insulated boxes. We've got these on display, which is pretty neat. But so refrigerants are one of the biggest pollutants to our ozone layer, and also things that are contributing to global warming. So refrigerants like chlorofluorocarbons are actually no longer in use. So the chlorine in chlorofluorocarbons, that chlorine was actually what was actually depleting the ozone layer. So those were banned, and now what they're primarily using are fluorocarbons or hydrofluorocarbons, HFCs, so without the chlorine in them, which are better in their emissions to the ozone layer, but they are still extremely harmful. And chlorofluorocarbons are actually between 1,000 and 9,000 times, they contribute between 1,000 and 9,000 times more to global warming than carbon dioxide. So the problem with these things in refrigerants is not really from their day-to-day usage. The problem with it is the way that they are disposed of. So 90% of those emissions are released in the disposal of these things. So it's really important, if you're ever getting rid of an older appliance like a refrigerator or an air conditioner or something like that, that you try to dispose of it the proper way, because they are able to carefully take out the fluorocarbons from those things, and they can convert them to other materials, or they can store them properly, and that allows them to not release into the atmosphere. And then they are coming up with new technology, kind of going back to the old technology, and using ammonia and also things like, oh my gosh, I forgot what it's called. Other chemicals that are more natural chemicals, or more natural chemicals is kind of a hard way to say it, but more natural things. Oh, like propane. I'm sorry, that's the word I was looking for. Like propane. But those were things that they were having problems with the old technology and leaking into systems, but now with newer technology, hopefully they can make that work. And using those natural things will actually help eliminate a lot of their emissions.
Yeah. So we have two ice boxes here on display. This one over here, yeah. You can see that you would put the ice chunk on the bottom, and then all of your goods in the inside to keep them nice and cool. And then I did want to we also wanted to show you guys this picture that we had mentioned. This was the original ice site, the Quag Ice Company at the site on Quantuck Creek in 1909, which we talked about at Ferrydale, actually. And then because of saltwater intrusion, they weren't able to harvest ice at Quantuck Creek. So it was moved here to Old Ice Pond at the Refuge, our freshwater pond. And you can see the difference in the style of the ice house. This one is just one big building. So it doesn't stand anymore. And actually, a lot of ice buildings, were the wood and all of the materials to build them were taken down because they were fire hazards after refrigerators were invented. And I see one really great question. Did the horses slide on the ice? That's an awesome question. And I didn't read anything that said that they slipped a lot. So I am not actually sure, but I think that they probably took it slow enough that they weren't sliding all over the place. And
probably helped too.
yeah, and the horseshoes probably helped them when they were on the ice as well. But thank you guys so much for tuning in today. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments. And we look forward to seeing you on Thursday at 1 o'clock for QWR Nature News. Thank you guys.